Liam the broker, Callahan, and Marco, Iron Fist Santini, weren't just names in Liverpool. Streets. They were the invisible kings of a deadly underworld controlling shipments' secrets and lives from the shadows while the city above remained oblivious to the empire, quietly taking shape beneath its feet. Liverpool's underworld began shifting, long before anyone realized it. In the early 2000s, the city looked calm on the surface, full of busy markets, football crowds, and families moving through everyday routines. But beneath that ordinary life, something silent was forming. A small group later known as the Dockside Circle slowly started building power in areas most people ignored. They focused on abandoned warehouses near the Mersey River, choosing spots that blended into the industrial landscape. These quiet spaces allowed them to operate without attracting unwanted attention. What began as a handful of individuals soon became a small but organized force that understood the value of staying invisible. The group specialized in secrecy. They avoided loud actions and instead worked through small, controlled steps. Their strategy relied on patience. They used old shipping companies as a mask, creating the appearance of normal business operations. This made their movements look harmless. Shipments came and went like any other cargo passing through the docks, and nothing seemed unusual to outside observers. Even those who worked nearby believed the activity was just part of the usual trade that had always defined Liverpool's waterfront. Inside the Dockside Circle, roles were carefully assigned. The group only recruited people who knew how to disappear into the background. Some handled transport schedules, others managed storage, and a few monitored incoming and outgoing cargo lists. Every member followed strict rules, understanding that a single mistake could expose the entire operation. Their early success came from avoiding unnecessary risks and learning from the failures of older gangs that had relied too heavily on violence and intimidation. As months passed, the Dockside Circle grew more confident. They upgraded their methods, using coded notes and untraceable communication systems. No digital footprints, no public meetings, and no visible leadership structure. This made it nearly impossible for outsiders to pinpoint who was in charge. People in the underworld heard whispers about a new group forming near the docks, but the lack of information made these rumors feel distant and unconfirmed. Some believed the gang didn't actually exist, while others assumed it was just a small-time operation that would eventually collapse. However, the gang's influence kept expanding quietly. They formed connections with individuals who had access to shipping manifests and warehouse keys. These connections allowed them to track goods moving across the city, giving them knowledge others didn't have. By understanding what entered and left the port each day, they gained control without firing a single shot. Their power was built on information rather than intimidation, making them different from any group Liverpool had seen before. By the end of their first year, the Dockside Circle had already laid the foundation for a hidden empire. Their operations blended perfectly with the natural flow of the city's trade, allowing them to remain unnoticed. Liverpool continued its daily rhythm, unaware that a silent force was shaping a new chapter in the city's underworld. The ground had already shifted, even though the surface looked the same. The Dockside Circle's influence did not remain confined to the warehouses by the Mersey. As the first year passed, the gang began building a network that stretched across Liverpool, connecting neighborhoods that had once seemed entirely separate from the criminal underworld. This network was invisible to ordinary citizens, hidden behind ordinary businesses, public spaces, and everyday routines. Members took positions in pubs, taxi services, repair garages, and even small markets. These places became quiet hubs of information, each one a small link in a chain that connected the docks to the rest of the city. By using everyday businesses, the circle avoided drawing attention while gaining access to key knowledge about movements, shipments, and local rivalries. Every member had a defined role. Some tracked shipments from the docks, noting what arrived, what left, and who had access to specific warehouses. Others worked on maintaining relationships with employees in unrelated industries, ensuring that nothing in their network could be traced back to the gang. Couriers moved through the city, delivering messages in coded forms, sometimes on scraps of paper, other times through carefully timed signals at public spaces. Even small gestures, like a hand on a pub counter or a particular arrangement of bottles, became part of the system. It was a network designed to function quietly, efficiently, and almost invisibly. What made the network dangerous was its adaptability. Members rotated positions, changed routes, and used multiple safe houses to avoid detection. The Circle understood that police and rival gangs often relied on predictable patterns, and their ability to alter routines constantly kept them a step ahead. Surveillance could monitor a single warehouse or street, but the Circle operated like a shadow across the entire city. Ordinary Liverpool residents passed by these hubs daily, completely unaware of the coordination occurring just beneath the surface of their routines. Money also began flowing through the network. Small, legitimate businesses were used as covers to launder funds from shipments of stolen goods and other illegal activities. The Circle invested in repairs, equipment, and supplies under the guise of ordinary trade. By keeping the financial transactions disguised, they avoided creating patterns that could draw suspicion from banks or authorities. Each link in the network had a purpose, from providing intelligence to maintaining the facade of normal business operations. Despite its growth, the Dockside Circle remained secretive. Leadership never met openly, and even team members often didn't know the full extent of the operation. Trust was earned slowly, and betrayal carried severe consequences. This secrecy created loyalty and fear in equal measure, making members cautious but highly effective. Their network allowed them to expand influence into areas where no gang had ventured before, reaching suburbs and city streets that had been considered neutral territory. By the end of this stage, the Circle had transformed from a small warehouse operation into a sprawling, well-hidden network that spanned the city. Liverpool's underworld had a new silent ruler, one that relied on intelligence, coordination, and secrecy rather than brute force. The gang had shown that power could be built quietly, invisibly, and with deadly efficiency, laying the groundwork for conflicts and revelations that would shake the city in the years to come. The emergence of a rival changed the underworld landscape of Liverpool entirely. For years, the Dockside Circle had grown quietly, operating in the shadows while avoiding direct confrontation. Their methods were subtle, strategic, and patient. But in the mid-2000s, a new group surfaced with a completely different approach. Known as Iron Moss, they were bold, violent, and unpredictable. Unlike the Circle, Iron Moss did not rely on secrecy alone. They made their presence felt through sudden attacks, intimidation, and public displays of force. Their arrival marked the first time in years that the city felt real tension between criminal organizations. Iron Moss focused on key locations that the Dockside Circle had long avoided drawing attention to. They targeted bars, nightclubs, and transport hubs, asserting dominance through fear rather than stealth. Their members were younger, reckless, and willing to take risks that the Circle carefully avoided. Within months, stories began circulating of street fights, vandalized properties, and sudden disappearances linked to the new gang. Residents who had previously ignored underworld activity now noticed the signs of danger: burnt-out cars, broken glass, and whispered warnings in local pubs. The city began to feel different, more unpredictable, more dangerous. The tension between the two groups grew quickly. At first, both tried to avoid open confrontation. The Circle continued its careful operations, trying to maintain distance while Iron Moss tested boundaries. However, clashes were inevitable. Small incidents blocked shipments, damaged cargo, and territory disputes started to escalate into larger confrontations. Neither gang wanted a prolonged fight at first, but Iron Moss' aggressive tactics made it impossible to maintain peace. Liverpool's streets became a silent battlefield or control over neighborhoods. Warehouses and transport routes meant survival. One of the most dangerous aspects of this rivalry was the unpredictability of Iron Moss. Unlike the Circle, they didn't follow strict protocols, and their actions were difficult to anticipate. Their attacks often appeared random, targeting areas with little strategic value but maximum psychological impact. This chaos disrupted the Circle's operations, forcing them to adapt quickly and rethink long-term strategies. The Circle, which had thrived on information and calculated moves, now faced an opponent who thrived on chaos. Iron Moss' rise also exposed weaknesses within Liverpool's underworld that had previously gone unnoticed. Older gangs, which had been dormant or reduced to minor operations, began to feel pressure. Some tried to align with one side or the other, while others were quietly eliminated. The network of alliances and rivalries shifted rapidly, and trust became a scarce commodity. Even law enforcement struggled to track the situation, as incidents occurred sporadically and without clear patterns. Each act of violence or sabotage was carefully planned to avoid direct evidence, but still send a warning. By the end of this period, Liverpool had transformed. The city's underworld was no longer dominated by a single secretive group. Instead, it had become a contested space where power was constantly challenged and where fear governed the streets. The Dockside Circle faced the first real threat to their empire, one that would force them into dangerous decisions and secretive maneuvers. The balance of power had shifted, and the stage was set for the dramatic confrontations and betrayals that would define the city as criminal history in the years to come. The quiet balance that had existed in Liverpool's underworld shattered one night at Evergreen Docks. For years, the docks had been the central hub of the Dockside Circle's operations, a place where shipments arrived and departed under the careful watch of loyal members. It was a location chosen for its anonymity, surrounded by old warehouses and seldom visited piers. But one evening, flames erupted in one of the largest warehouses, consuming goods, equipment, and records in minutes. The fire was massive, lighting up the night sky and drawing emergency services from across the city. What shocked the underworld most was that the warehouse had contained some of the Circle's most critical shipments. Years of planning and secrecy were suddenly in jeopardy. The cause of the fire remained uncertain, but whispers quickly spread through Liverpool's underworld. Rumors suggested Iron Moss was behind the attack, attempting to weaken the Circle before challenging them openly. Others claimed it could have been an internal mistake, perhaps a rival within the Circle seeking to gain power. The uncertainty caused panic among members, who had never dealt with such a sudden and destructive disruption. This was the first time the Circle had felt truly vulnerable, their invisible empire shaken by a single catastrophic event. The financial loss was immense. Cargo meant for distribution vanished in flames, and the Circle had to absorb the cost without letting it show externally. Their careful image of control and stability was threatened, forcing them to scramble for alternative storage locations and new supply routes. Operations that had once flowed like clockwork were thrown into disorder. Couriers were rerouted, shipments delayed, and trusted contacts questioned about the fire. Every step forward now carried the risk of exposure, and even small mistakes could lead to devastating consequences. The psychological impact on the gang was just as severe as the financial damage. Members who had felt untouchable suddenly realized that the Circle's secrecy could not protect them from determined enemies. Fear and suspicion crept into every corner of their network. Longtime associates began to question loyalty, wondering if someone had betrayed them from within. The Circle's leadership, known for careful decision-making and patience, faced intense pressure to respond, but the challenge was how to do so without inviting further disaster. The fire had not only destroyed physical assets, but had destabilized the balance of power that the Circle had maintained for years. Meanwhile, Iron Moss capitalized on the chaos. Their sudden increase in street-level influence coincided with the Circle's moment of weakness. Territories once dominated by the Circle began to feel the subtle intrusion of the rival gang. Local residents noticed the changes. Shipments delayed at markets, new faces in pubs, and unexplained clashes around transport hubs. Liverpool's streets became a chessboard, each move observed and countered with careful calculation. Both gangs now operated in a heightened state of alert, knowing that a single misstep could result in loss of life or the collapse of their operations. The fire at Evergreen Docks marked a turning point. It transformed a previously hidden conflict into a tense and visible rivalry. The Dockside Circle, once confident in their invisible network, now faced the dual threat of financial ruin and violent opposition. Relationships that had been unshakable began to strain under pressure. Trust became fragile, and alliances shifted quietly in the shadows. The city's underworld was entering a new phase, one where survival depended on adaptability, secrecy, and the willingness to confront danger in ways the Circle had never imagined. Liverpool itself, seemingly indifferent to the quiet rise of these gangs, was now unknowingly the stage for an unfolding battle that would reshape its criminal landscape. The tension between the Dockside Circle and Iron Moss soon spilled beyond the hidden corners of Liverpool and began affecting the city itself. Streets that had once been ordinary and familiar started to carry an undercurrent of danger. Residents noticed the subtle changes first: more late-night disturbances, damaged property, and people moving with caution in areas that were once considered safe. The gang's activities were no longer confined to warehouses or backstreets. They were spreading into neighborhoods, transport routes, and commercial areas. Every shipment, every meeting, and every exchange carried the risk of violence, and the city's ordinary rhythm was being quietly disrupted. The Circle and Iron Moss adapted their tactics to maintain control while avoiding direct confrontation in public. The Circle relied on intelligence, moving goods and messages through coded signals, hidden drop points, and trusted couriers. Iron Moss, meanwhile, relied on visible power, sending messages through vandalism, sudden attacks, and intimidation. Their contrasting methods created a tense equilibrium. Both gangs avoided large-scale public clashes, knowing the police were watching, but every minor incident sent ripples through Liverpool's streets. Ordinary citizens often became unwitting witnesses or obstacles, making daily life unpredictable and, in some areas, dangerous. Police intelligence units began noticing patterns in the criminal activity. Investigators tracked unusual movements around old factories, warehouses, and abandoned docks. Surveillance cameras, informants, and plainclothes officers gradually pieced together a fragmented picture of the Underworld network. Despite this, both gangs remained elusive. The Circle frequently relocated their safe houses and shifted their shipping routes, while Iron Moss operated through decentralized cells, making it difficult to identify leadership. Each side used the city itself as a shield, blending operations into ordinary life to stay one step ahead of law enforcement. The pressure on Liverpool's residents increased as the gang's operations touched everyday life. Markets faced disruptions when shipments failed to arrive. Taxi drivers became involved unknowingly in courier activities. And pubs and social hubs were subtly monitored, becoming points of contact for messages and warnings. Fear became a quiet part of daily routines. People avoided certain streets at night, refrained from asking questions, and quickly learned to read the signs of gang activity. Ordinary citizens were not direct targets, but the invisible presence of conflict made the city feel less safe. The gang's growing power also forced smaller criminal operations to adapt. Older, dormant groups either aligned with one side or risked being eliminated. Informants and insiders were in constant flux, shifting allegiances as the conflict intensified. Trust became a rare commodity, even within each gang. Every shipment, every meeting, and every financial transaction was scrutinized for potential betrayal. Members of the Circle and Iron Moss were constantly on alert, knowing that a misstep could lead to severe consequences, including violence or the collapse of critical operations. By this stage, Liverpool's underworld had evolved into a complex web of hidden influence, where ordinary life intersected with criminal operations in subtle, almost invisible ways. The city itself became a map of power, control, and fear. Police, residents, and rival gangs all operated within this delicate tension, often unaware of the full scope of the forces at play. Both the Circle and Iron Moss understood that the streets were more than just a battleground. They were a strategic tool. Control of neighborhoods, routes, and public spaces meant survival, influence, and the ability to expand without exposing the network. As the pressure mounted, the city became a living trap for those involved in the underworld. Ordinary routines were disrupted, loyalties were tested, and the line between safety and danger blurred. Liverpool's underworld had grown into a powerful, silent force that touched every corner of the city, setting the stage for betrayals, confrontations, and unexpected discoveries that would redefine the balance of power. The city itself, though unaware, had become a participant in a high-stakes struggle that would determine which gang emerged as the ultimate ruler of Liverpool's hidden empire. Tensions within the Dockside Circle reached a breaking point when loyalty began to fracture from within. For years, the Circle had operated on strict rules of trust and discretion. Members were carefully vetted, roles clearly defined, and internal hierarchies respected. But the rise of Iron Moss and the pressure of constant threats created cracks in even the most disciplined organization. Fear, ambition, and opportunity began to outweigh loyalty, and the first whispers of betrayal quietly took root. One senior member, ambitious and dissatisfied with his current standing, began secretly communicating with Iron Moss. His goal was simple: gain more power and profit, while positioning himself as an indispensable figure in the underworld. Betrayal was subtle at first. Small shipments vanished without explanation. Communications were delayed, and trusted contacts received conflicting information. These minor disruptions seemed isolated, but were, in reality, carefully orchestrated to destabilize the Circle from within. Leadership initially suspected external interference, blaming Iron Moss for every misstep. But the sudden precision of Iron Moss operations, always seeming one step ahead of the Circle, suggested that someone inside had been providing information. Paranoia spread throughout the gang, and long-term alliances began to crumble. Members who had once been inseparable now eyed each other with suspicion, wondering who could be secretly aiding the enemy. Internal betrayal had cascading effects. Key shipments were intercepted, safe houses were compromised, and valuable assets disappeared at critical moments. The Circle, which had thrived on meticulous planning and intelligence, now faced chaos. They attempted to implement stricter controls, increase surveillance, and test loyalty, but the traitor was careful and methodical, leaving few traces of their involvement. The Circle's once efficient network slowed down, and minor mistakes quickly multiplied into serious setbacks. Every operation became risky, and members were forced to second-guess both their peers and themselves. Ron Moss exploited the internal conflict ruthlessly. While the Circle struggled to regain stability, Iron Moss strengthened its control over contested territories. They launched sudden attacks and disrupted shipments, but more importantly, they exploited the Circle's distrust to infiltrate areas that had previously been untouchable. The combination of internal betrayal and external pressure created a perfect storm, weakening the Circle's dominance without a single large-scale confrontation. What had once been a secretive and controlled empire was now vulnerable to both internal collapse and external assault. The psychological impact on the Circle's members was devastating. Loyalty, the foundation of their operations, now felt fragile. Everyone was a potential traitor, and even trusted allies were viewed with skepticism. Decision-making became slow and cautious, and mistakes once rare now occurred frequently. The gang's leaders faced the dual challenge of rooting out the traitor while continuing day-to-day operations, a task that stretched resources and morale to the breaking point. By the end of this period, the Dockside Circle had been fundamentally transformed. The internal betrayal had introduced instability that would take years to fully repair, if it could ever be repaired at all. Members learned that power alone was not enough to survive. Loyalty and vigilance were equally critical. The combination of internal sabotage and external pressure set the stage for dramatic confrontations, revealing that even the most disciplined and secretive gang could be undone from within. Liverpool's underworld had entered a phase where trust was as dangerous as any rival, and survival depended not only on secrecy and intelligence, but on the ability to navigate betrayal that came from the very heart of one's own organization. After months of careful observation, police surveillance finally detected unusual activity around an abandoned building on the outskirts of Liverpool. The structure, a long-forgotten warehouse near a disused railway line, had long been ignored by authorities and civilians alike. It appeared ordinary from the outside: broken windows, faded brick walls, and rusted metal doors, but inside, it concealed secrets that would shock investigators and the entire city's underworld. Officers noticed frequent trips by various individuals, always at odd hours, carrying packages that seemed innocuous but aroused suspicion. The investigation intensified, and the discovery that followed would expose the hidden depths of both the Dockside Circle and Iron Moss. Upon entering the building, authorities uncovered a hidden underground vault, concealed behind false walls and reinforced steel doors. Inside, the vault contained detailed financial records, encrypted messages, maps of transport routes, and shipment logs belonging to both gangs. The evidence revealed years of meticulous planning, operations, and covert transactions, linking the gangs to businesses, warehouses, and shipping companies throughout Liverpool and beyond. The documents showed that what had appeared to be isolated criminal acts were actually part of a massive, coordinated network spanning the city. Each shipment, each deal, and each seemingly minor disruption could now be traced to strategic moves within a broader criminal strategized discovery stunned investigators. They realized that the gang's influence extended far beyond what anyone had imagined. What had seemed like a series of minor incidents delayed shipments, petty thefts, and sporadic attacks was actually the visible tip of an enormous criminal enterprise. The documents revealed alliances with corrupt officials, intermediaries in foreign countries, and local businesses unwittingly involved in laundering money. Liverpool's underworld was not simply a collection of violent street gangs. It was a carefully constructed network that had shaped the flow of commerce and controlled movement in and out of the city for years. The vault also contained evidence of betrayals and shifting allegiances, exposing members who had secretly switched sides or provided critical intelligence to rivals. Investigators were able to piece together the internal conflicts that had destabilized the Dockside Circle, revealing exactly how Iron Moss had gained an advantage and why certain shipments had disappeared at key moments. The information painted a clear picture of the high-level planning behind what had seemed chaotic and unpredictable. It became apparent that secrecy, loyalty, and betrayal had been carefully intertwined in a dangerous web that few outsiders could penetrate. The discovery of the vault sent shockwaves through Liverpool's criminal world. Word spread quickly, though cautiously, that law enforcement now possessed knowledge of operations that had previously been invisible. Both gangs were forced to confront the reality that their secret empire could no longer remain hidden. Safe houses were abandoned, couriers rerouted, and encrypted communication methods suddenly became ineffective under the scrutiny of investigators who now had the inside knowledge to decode them. This breakthrough also gave law enforcement unprecedented leverage. They could trace years of illegal activity, identify key players, and link crimes that had previously appeared unrelated. The vault revealed not only the scale of the operations, but also the vulnerabilities that had been carefully concealed. The Dockside Circle and Iron Moss, once untouchable, now faced the reality that the city's underworld could be dismantled from the inside. The hidden vault was a turning point, exposing the true depth and danger of Liverpool's gangs and setting the stage for their eventual collapse. The discovery proved that even the most secretive and disciplined criminal networks could leave traces, and that meticulous investigation could uncover the skeletons hidden beneath years of silence. Liverpool, the city that had seemed indifferent to the silent rise of these gangs, was now aware, through the eyes of law enforcement, of the invisible empire that had shaped its streets for over a decade. The underworld secrets were laid bare, and nothing would ever be the same again. The collapse of Liverpool's criminal underworld came suddenly, yet it had been silently building for months. Both the Dockside, Circle, and Iron Moss had been weakened by internal betrayals, relentless pressure from law enforcement, and the exposure of their operations through the hidden vault. The gangs, once untouchable, were now vulnerable, and neither could predict the other's next move. Iron Moss, desperate to remove the Circle entirely, planned a final decisive operation. They intended to strike at multiple key locations simultaneously, hoping to seize control of the remaining territories and eliminate rivals in one coordinated assault. Yet even their meticulous planning could not account for the lingering consequences of earlier betrayals. Unbeknownst to Iron Moss, members of the Circle, who had previously been compromised by internal betrayal, had secretly approached law enforcement. They provided detailed intelligence on Iron Moss plans, revealing safe houses, shipment schedules, and the locations of critical personnel. The Circle, weakened but not yet defeated, had orchestrated this risky maneuver to regain control by using the police as a shield. The intelligence allowed authorities to prepare a strategic response that would simultaneously target both gangs, catching them off guard. The coordinated crackdown was swift and overwhelming. Police raided warehouses, safe houses, and meeting points across Liverpool, seizing weapons, cash, and contraband. Couriers and foot soldiers were apprehended, leaving gang leaders exposed. The simultaneous nature of the operation prevented either group from mounting a counterattack. Iron Moss, expecting to dominate the city streets, found themselves trapped and disoriented. The Circle, already weakened by betrayal and disrupted operations, could do little to resist. Within days, the two gangs that had terrorized Liverpool for over a decade were effectively neutralized. The collapse did not come without consequences for the city itself. Streets once tense with hidden threats fell silent, yet the scars of the underworld's reign remained visible. Businesses affected by disrupted shipments and intimidation slowly recovered, but the memory of violence lingered. Residents cautiously returned to routines that had been disrupted for years, now aware of the invisible networks that had operated beneath the surface of their daily lives. Police, armed with knowledge gained from the vault and insider intelligence, worked to dismantle lingering remnants, ensuring that the gangs could not simply regroup elsewhere. Despite the dismantling of both gangs, investigators understood that the underworld was not entirely eliminated. Some members had gone underground, disappearing into obscurity while waiting for the right opportunity to return. Law enforcement believed that fragments of the Circle and Iron Moss still operated quietly, maintaining contacts and influence that could resurface if given the chance. Liverpool, while no longer overtly under threat, had been permanently changed by the rise and fall of these gangs. The collapse also highlighted the fragility of criminal empires built on secrecy and fear. Internal betrayal, external pressure, and unexpected exposure proved to be as dangerous as any rival gang. The Circle and Iron Moss, despite their power and influence, could not survive the combination of mistrust, miscalculation, and law enforcement intervention. Their downfall served as a stark reminder that even the most disciplined criminal networks leave vulnerabilities that can be exploited. Gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the story of the Dockside, Circle, and Iron Moss remained a warning. The city had been a stage for a silent war fought in shadows, and while one chapter of the underworld ended, the memory of its operations lingered. The gang's rise, secretive strategies, betrayals, and ultimate collapse demonstrated the complex interplay of power, loyalty, and vulnerability in a criminal empire, leaving a lasting mark on the city and the people who unknowingly lived through its hidden battles.